population have been displaced to the south of Gaza, primarily Rafah, and are still bombed regularly, even though these are supposed to be safe areas. They now stay in tents, overcrowded UN facilities, schools, public spaces, homes of friends and relatives, wherever they can. There is no running water anywhere in Gaza, or electricity, and barely any fuel. Food assistance is only trickling in because Israel's blockage and preventing access under the pretext of security. Gaza's entire population of 2.3 million is being starved. 93% face crisis level of hunger and malnutrition. 93%. I'm quoting you, international organizations, UN. Infectious diseases brought about by contaminated water, a lack of hygiene, and overcrowding is already becoming a pandemic. A pandemic. Cases of cholera, respiratory illnesses, diarrhea, scabies, hepatitis, chickenpox are all soaring. This will only get worse during the cold winter months. Gaza's ability to treat people is and has been limited. As you all know, out of the 38 hospitals, only 8 are functioning, partially. Israel has decimated the health sector. Combined, these are deliberate policies of starvation and diseases used as a weapon of war. Used as a weapon of war. And we have no final count yet of the innocent people who have died because of the lack of health treatment, health care, starvation, diseases, pandemics, and what have you. The numbers I quoted earlier was only those who have been killed and wounded directly because of Israeli airstrikes and fire. But I assure you the numbers of those who have been killed because they were not treated for their cancer or they didn't get the dialysis for their kidney failure is going to be shocking. An entire population has been sentenced to death or mass expulsion. Exactly as top Israeli officials have been saying since the beginning of this aggression and even before the 7th of October. Using starvation as a weapon of war has happened before. It happened in Ukraine in the 30s. It happened in Sarajevo in the 90s. It has happened in many other places, but never in history of mankind in such a short span of time and at this scale. Along with the wholesale destruction of Gaza, Israeli onslaught on the West Bank is at a pace. In Jenin, in Nablus, in Jerusalem, in Hebron, Khalil, everywhere. But the whole destruction of Gaza is a deliberate genocide and ethnic cleansing. Very deliberate. The intent and the execution. Despite this unprecedented man-made humanitarian disaster, we see no serious efforts by the most important international actors to bring about an immediate, sustainable comprehensive and permanent ceasefire. We do not see efforts to bring about an immediate and comprehensive, lasting ceasefire. Without an immediate ceasefire, there is no hope. Immediate, comprehensive, permanent. Without that immediate ceasefire, we see no hope of addressing the apocalyptic situation in Gaza. Nothing comes before an immediate ceasefire. All those who want to discuss other issues are missing the point, are not helping. This remains our top priority. In parallel to demanding an immediate permanent ceasefire, there has to be a massive international humanitarian efforts to address Gaza's acute needs, alongside a humongous reconstruction efforts to make the area livable again. So families can send their kids to school again. They can send their children to hospitals to be treated again. Unlike Dr. Beseso, who had to operate on his daughter without anesthesia, amputating her leg, and I'm sure many of you have seen that horrifying image. We must make Gaza livable again, and as soon as possible. Unfortunately, countries like the US and the UK have so far resisted calling for an immediate ceasefire. Do these countries really want to support what I have just described? This is the only meaning of it. Starvation, displacement, extermination of an entire population. With the UN Security Council at a stalemate because of the US vetoes, all eyes are now on the International Court of Justice, ICJ. South Africa's case against Israel at the ICJ is the first serious international effort at ending this appalling situation and demanding accountability after 75 years of being denied our basic rights equal to all other peoples. This is the first serious attempt. It came about because the international community has failed in its duty to protect civilians as per their own commitments and responsibilities as contracting parties to the international order, to the rules-based international order. It came about because the UN Security Council has for decades failed to implement its own resolutions on Palestine. For decades. More than 80 UN Security Council resolutions. All stand unimplemented. Let's be clear. Israel chose to conduct a war of vengeance, of genocidal rage. In fact, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is not only conducting a war of vengeance, but a war for his own political survival. Netanyahu has already plainly stated that no one and nothing, not the ICJ, not any other country, will prevent him from pursuing this genocidal aggression to its end. He has publicly stated that. In other words, Israel has been clear that it does not intend to respect the findings of the highest arbiter of international law in the world, the highest court of the globe, the highest judicial authority for our human family. And this is not just in the last 100 days. Israel has refused to cooperate with any international investigations for 75 years. Israel wants to reserve for itself judgment about who is violating international law and international humanitarian law. Israel wants to be the only referee of its own crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide. And the West let it do so. Certain key Western governments have let Israel do so. It is clear from the way Israel has conducted its war, its aggression, that it is regularly and openly violating the laws of war, violating international law, violating international humanitarian law, violating our very basic human values, our universal values. The UK has to be, the United Kingdom has to be clear about these violations. The UK and the rest of the world must be consistent about international law, must be consistent about accountability, must be consistent about the way forward. Things do not add up. We are working with our people, our allies, friends, brothers and sisters in the region and in the international community to ensure there will be no forced displacement of Palestinians outside of our homeland. That's a top priority, next to, followed by an immediate permanent ceasefire. There must not be another mass expulsion of Palestinians like the Nakba of 1948. Never again. Never again. 70% of our nation were ethnically cleansed in 1948. We shall not see that experience again, and we will not. And let me assure all of you here the following. There is no military solution to this. Israel has been at it for 75 years. It has failed and will continue to fail, despite the backing of the US and other countries. No military solution to this. There is only a political and legal solution. The legal solution is being sought as we speak in the ICJ, in the ICC, the National Criminal Court, and in the Human Rights Council, the UN Human Rights Council, among many other legal institutions. Let me remind you that long before the 7th of October, the State of Palestine, which I represent here today, asked the ICC to investigate war crimes during the and after Israel's 2014 aggression on Gaza. So a case is there at the ICC. We have given full mandate and jurisdiction for the ICC to investigate all war crimes, all crimes committed in the occupied land of Palestine. And the ICC has been dragging its feet since 2014. We also referred the legal situation in the occupied territory for an advisory opinion at the ICJ, at the International Court of Justice, to rule on Israel's illegal occupation just last year. A case is already there. So we have been reverting to international legality. We believe in the power of international law. We need the international judicial system to come in with full force, with equal application of international rules. This is a very important track. That's why we welcomed South Africa's case in the ICJ, because we believe in the legal track to be a key track, because we believe accountability has been missing for 75 years. And short of reinforcing accountability, we will revisit the horrors we are living today. The political solution should come in irreversible and credible steps. Irreversible and credible steps. There needs to be a clear decision, resolution in the Security Council, in the UN Security Council, to implement its own resolutions. Enough. One, to remove the US veto on the State of Palestine, assuming its our rightful position as a full member of the United Nations. Because of the US veto, we are now a state in the UN system, but a non-member state. This veto has to be removed. Two, to recognize the State of Palestine on the 1967 borders, and we are recognized by 141 countries. That's the absolute vast majority of the world. The rest is a club you know very well. US, UK, Western Europe. If you are serious about two states, and we'll come to the two states in the conversations. Either we are serious about these resolutions, or the whole foundation of the international system is hollowed out, simply hollowed out. This is the biggest stress test of the international order since its founding in 1940, in the mid-40s, since the Second World War. Biggest stress test, both at the political level, i.e. UN Security Council, and the legal level, the ICJ and the ICC. The implementation of UN resolutions can then be addressed at an international conference, peace conference, that will discuss timetables, underwritings, guarantees, security, empowerment of existing national institutions, and enforcement of international resolutions. None of the above, none of it includes or needs a process or endless negotiations. There is a consensus about where we should go. All what we need is implementation and enforcement and international will to do so. For 35 years, my friends, the world has said it supports the end of Israel's occupation. I'm talking about the world, consensus. From the far west to the far east, from the far north to the far south. Consensus supports the end of Israel's occupation that began in 1967, the establishment of an independent sovereign state of Palestine with Jerusalem as its capital, and a fair resolution to the issue of Palestinian refugees in accordance with international resolutions. What is there to negotiate? What is there to negotiate? Do you ever recall any other place where international resolutions have been negotiated? You negotiate when there is a dispute. There is no dispute here. It is time to stop paying lip service, and I'm addressing the international community here. Paying lip service and start getting serious. This is the time. Now is the time. The State of Palestine is ready. The State of Palestine is ready to take charge of the whole territory of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza immediately. The State of Palestine has the capacity. We do have the capacity and institutions to do so with international support, of course. And I refer you to many international studies in the last many years, including the World Bank, that have said that we have built, still under occupation, national institutions at the level of middle income, free, independent, sovereign countries. So please don't talk to us about capacity, because we have it and we can build it further. However, we refuse any military or partial solutions for Gaza. Gaza is an integral part of the State of Palestine, of the Palestinian territory. Any role for the State of Palestine has to come in the context of independence and sovereignty. We do not accept Israel's goal to separate Gaza, carve Gaza from the rest of Palestine. And that has been a constant goal for decades. Israel wants to spread the conflict, and this is very serious, very real, and very dangerous. Netanyahu wants to drag everyone into his own political calculations and survival. And you've seen what has happened over the last few days and weeks. And they want to spread the conflict not only for the surviving of Netanyahu, but because they have no political solution. There is no solution agenda on the table so far in Israel. Its allies should not help it in that direction, shouldn't. Its allies should once and for all get serious about addressing the root cause of the conflict, namely Israel's illegal and brutal military occupation of Palestinian land, the theft of our resources, the subjugation of our people, the oppression of our people, the apartheid regime they have erected, the besiegement of our entire population in Gaza, and all the violations you will know and record it and document it. And as you all know, this has been happening for 75 years. Only that way lies peace. The real question is, who is prepared to take a serious stand for international law and for peace? That is a question we are asking at this point in time. And with that, I'll take your questions. Thank you. Okay, we'll start with you.
This is Behlül Çetinkaya from Turkish News Agency, Anadolu. Yesterday, Prime Minister Sunak asked Muslim MPs Sultana to call on Hamas and Houthis to de-escalate the situation, and Muslim MPs found this an Islamophobic remark. What's your comment on this?
Our issue is not religious. Religion is absolutely innocent of this situation. This is not a Muslim-Jewish issue. It's a ridiculous proposition to assume that we have an issue with Israel because of their identity. We have an issue with Israel because of the identity of the oppressors. That's not true. The issue is with the fact of our oppression. It could be any identity. And therefore, we would want to warn any leaders of using such language. As I tried to outline before, our issue is legal and political. It has nothing to do with religion. I have been seeing the outpouring support here in the UK, including the massive demonstrations, and I assure you there is a considerable number of Jewish brothers and sisters who take part in these demos all the time. So this divisive politics between this religious group and that religious group does not help, doesn't help. Please, at the end. Sky.
Hello, Sikhan Kamani from Channel 4 News. I realise it's difficult to contemplate the day after the war, in the midst of the war, in the midst of so much suffering, but I wonder if you could share any insight into the conversations that have been taking place between particularly American officials and PA officials about what role there could be for the PA in the future. What's the PA response and suggestions been to that? What kind of suggestions have the Americans been making? I know they repeatedly use the phraseology, I believe, a reformed and revitalized PA in the future. Perhaps you could share some insight into that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Issues of revitalizing Palestinian national institutions is a purely internal matter. Any international intervention would be extremely counterproductive because it's meddling. We have our national institutions, we have our legitimate institutions, we have the PLO that represents all Palestinians inside and outside. The PLO is not only recognized as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people by the region and the world, but first and foremost by our people. Not one Palestinian challenges the legitimacy of the PLO. Of course we are not perfect. Who is? Name me one government that is perfect. We need to make sure that our institutions are at the level that our people expect. But that's a purely Palestinian national matter. internal Palestinian national matter. Yes, we heard many things from the US in conversations. We heard many promises, many vows, and so far they have been unimplemented. From the US wanting Israel to downscale and start stopping its aggression, which has not happened, Israel is doubling down, all the way to simple issues like Israel stopped the piracy on our own money, you know, the tax they collect on our behalf, and they have been withholding for the last 3 months. The US said from day one, this has to be repaid, it's your money, it's not their money. Even that, the US couldn't get through Israel. And therefore, this poses a serious question about the US's ability and influence on Israel, despite the fact that the US is the biggest political, legal, material, military backer of Israel. Most of Israel's weaponry, including all these 2,000 pounds bombs that are falling on the heads of our families, are American-made. So either America doesn't use its leverage or doesn't know how to use its leverage. Please.
Hi, Sophie Alexander from Sky News. You seem to have placed due importance on the ruling from the ICJ. What if the ICJ rules in Israel's favour?
There is no way the ICJ would rule in Israel's favor. There is no possible legal way. This was the first time in history that a genocide has been recorded by the people who were executed, transmitted live all over the world. There is no way Israel can hide its intent of committing genocide. There is no way on earth. From the Prime Minister invoking the Amalek just the first day of the aggression, to the Defense Minister with his hands saying that I've just got water, electricity, fuel, gasoline, everything, all the way to members of the Cabinet, Knesset. And therefore, this is a defining moment. Should the ICJ stick to its legal mandate and succeed in its ruling, it have succeeded for itself and for the international order, for the rules-based international order. Should it fail, I think it would have failed itself, its mandate, and the entire rules-based order. Please, BBC. Sorry, I'll come to all of you. BBC.
Paul Anderson, BBC. Could I just follow up a question about the ICJ? It's going to take years before they rule on genocide. It's a legal mountain for the South Africans to climb. You know that. Everyone knows that. What are your actual practical hopes for the outcome of the ICJ? Are you more interested in what they might do in terms of issuing provisional orders in the coming weeks? Because waiting for 4 years for a genocide verdict is not very useful, is it?
It isn't, and that's why the South African case was very clear. They presented a case in two forms. The first is provisional measures, that the court should issue a temporary injunction to stop the genocide until the merit of genocide is being investigated. I agree that the second part will take some time, and the process of courts are usually lengthy. But the first one, as per the very mandate of the ICJ, should be very short and should be looked at within days, or maximum few weeks. And therefore, it is that part that we are waiting for. We want to see an immediate injunction for Israel to stop. Now, many would say that Israel did not heed the ICJ before. Israel may not heed the ICJ now, but the legal and political ramification of an ICJ decision for an immediate injunction of the aggression and the genocide would have consequences, and we would build on it. This is not going to be maybe a knockdown effect or a knockout effect, but it's a major, major step in the right direction for two things. First is stopping this carnage because nobody else did. It's not like we have other options. No one else did. And for the sake of accountability. And here accountability is key, my friend. It's very key. We must make sure that what has taken place over the last 100 days will never ever happen again. All of us, including you in the media. These atrocities, the normalization of mass killing of children, the normalization of mass destruction of homes, schools, the normalization of starvation, the normalization of the use of diseases as a weapon is the most dangerous thing that happened in our history since the World War II, and even before. And to ensure that this does not ever happen again, we must make sure that those who have done so are brought to justice. That's the best way to do so, and perhaps the only way to do so. We need accountability so we bring justice to the victims, but we also need deterrent. And you tell me, what would be the best deterrent? The best deterrent is a non-violent legal act at the ICJ. South Africa, and before it, the state of Palestine, were using these legitimate legal means so we don't give way to others to use different means. You see? This is, everybody who blocks that venue is somebody who is promoting violence. That's the actual truth that needs to be conveyed and portrayed there. Okay, I'll come to you.
Oh, Your Excellency, it's Rafi Berg from the BBC. Just want to ask you to say a little bit more, if you wouldn't mind, about the UK. You said you expect the UK to be clear about Israel's violations of the laws of war, and you've certainly presented a very strong case and position this morning. In reality, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has rejected the South African accusation of genocide against Israel. The UK opposes a ceasefire. So do you feel let down by the UK, or do you feel that your message has perhaps failed to penetrate the UK decision makers? And secondly, if you don't mind, the Home Secretary, as you'll know, is to ban Hizb ut-Tahrir at the end of this week, almost certainly. I'd like to know your response to that, whether you condone that or you disagree with that, the banning of this group.
Thank you, Rafi. Well, as I said, we want to see a UK policy that is consistent and clear, and we don't see that. On the one hand, we hear the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and others saying that, you know, the ICJ has no mandate. The case against Israel of genocide does not stand. They say that, right? You just quoted them. They appointed, it's a self-appointment as international judges. It's intervention and interference in the international judicial system. But when they are asked, does Israel violate international law, like only a couple of days ago in the parliament, they say, oh, we're not lawyers. We don't intervene. This has to be left to the experts. This is the inconsistency. This is the double standards. This is the selectivity. This is the hypocrisy. Also the inconsistency in many other forms. Only recently the UK government has announced a new policy, significant and welcomed, that they will ban violent settlers from accessing the UK. They will be put on a blacklist. Welcomed. Serious policy. In my opinion, that was a very significant moment, because you know why? Not because of the policy itself, but this is the first time in 75 years the UK takes any step that has to do with sanctions, the first time ever. Yet, And we have said publicly, and I repeat it here, that policy needs to be more comprehensive because there is no such a thing as good settlers and bad settlers. All settlers are illegal. All settlements are illegal. All these entities and those who reside in it are very clearly defined in international law as war crimes. This is not us defining it. This is the Fourth Geneva Convention defining it. The transfer of the occupying power population to the occupied land is a war crime. Yet, I have just said this was a significant development. Where is the inconsistency here? Only last Wednesday, the UK government pushes ahead a legislation using the power of the law, a legislation in the parliament that has been voted in the third and final reading last Wednesday, so they curb public bodies here, and perhaps others, from divesting from these illegal settlements, from taking any step to actually mark that the products of these settlements are illegal. It's such a bill that, number one, gives another layer of protection to the illegal settlement products, those who work in settlements, illegal settlers, a new level of protection, shielding. And furthermore, it says, and this law does not apply if a new government comes in office, i.e., because the beginning of the legislation says any public body, what have you, has to be in line with the government policy. Ironically, the government policy does not call for the sanctions on the settlement products and activities, transactions. So Israel was unfortunately shielded by the first part, but they go even further to say even if a government changes its policy, Israel remains to be the exception. Unbelievable. Furthermore, they erase any distinction between Israel, the occupied territories, and the Golan Heights. They put it in one sentence, one paragraph, one item as the exception. This is the inconsistency. Where are you exactly? Do you consider Israel's occupation of the 1967 borders to be a military occupation and colonization? Where are you exactly? I tell you, there is such inconsistency in the UK policy that I, as an ambassador here to my country and for my people, I no longer understand, if you ask me, what is the UK policy vis-à-vis Palestine? I don't. Inconsistent, contradictory.
And Hizbut Tahrir?
I don't have much details about that. I really don't.
Well,
This is a UK matter, and I'll be looking. Yes, I am the Palestinian ambassador, so I comment on Palestinian issues that has to do with the UK. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I think you came late. You came after because I have many hands here. I have many hands here.
Emmett Lyons from CBS News.
Yes.
In December, the Palestinian Authority Prime Minister Mohammed Shai said that Hamas is an integral part of the Palestinian mosaic. I know, again, it's hard to talk about the day after and a minister in Gaza in the future, but do you still hold that view?
Yes.
And following on from that, how do you view an administration with a reformed Hamas, a reformed Palestinian Authority?
Hamas is a Palestinian matter, not an international matter. And only a Palestinian national institution, a Palestinian internal process will integrate, will deal with that, not international and external intervention. Hamas is not just its military wing. Hamas is also an idea, an ideology. And if you want to challenge that idea, you have to present a different idea. And there has been many efforts, many attempts at reconciliation in the past. Only a few months before the October 7th, in July, there was an initiative by our President Mahmoud Abbas, bringing all heads of various factions, including the heads of Hamas, in Al Alamein in Egypt, and the discussion is ongoing. The idea is Hamas needs to be part of the PLO and needs to respect and abide by the PLO's provisions and the PLO's responsibilities.
Just to expand on that question, so would you see Hamas as having a kind of specific legal institutional role in running Gaza after the conflict?
Hamas is a political faction and a military wing. The institutions that should run Gaza, Jerusalem, and the West Bank is the institutions of the State of Palestine. And Hamas needs to be brought to the Palestinian national institutions in an internal national reconciliation process that ensures that all of us are committed to the very agenda, the principles, the commitments of the PLO for its own people, our agenda, which is very clear, and for the international law. So issues of governance has got to be in the hands of the State of Palestine and the institutions of the State of Palestine. Sorry. Andrew.
Thank you, Ambassador. And just to follow up, there's been a lot of talk about diplomatic pressure on PA to form a technocratic government that could administer both Gaza and the West Bank after the war. Are those conversations going on? Is there pressure being put on the PA to come up with new names for a Prime Minister, for a cabinet, etc.? Can you give us any insight into those kind of conversations that are taking place and what the Americans and others are telling Mahmoud Abbas and the PA? Thank you.
I can't share with you conversations, Andrew, but I can tell you the following. I can tell you our position. I mean, our position is the problem is not picking a name and choosing another name. That's not the problem. And the Prime Minister we have now is a very capable national figure. This is not about personalities. This is about changing the whole dynamics. In my opinion, if you bring Nelson Mandela back and hand him the keys, they will not succeed given the dynamics now. So the issue is not to always do what the international community has done for a long time. This is a movie we have seen for 100 times, for 1,000 times. Whenever the international community fails to pressure Israel, they turn their eyes into Palestinians. And they say, oh, only if you fix this and that, you have issues here and have issues there. And remember what happened with our late President Yasser Arafat and the besiegement and the killing of Yasser Arafat, under the same pretext. We have our institutions. We have our leaders. We have our people. And our people demand many things. By the way, the Palestinian people their expectations is very high, I assure you. And the main pressure is internal. But the external side of the pressure is not very helpful. Why? Because part of that argument, Andrew, is not just to export the crisis and the failure to pressure Israel upon us, and let's see if we have a new government, maybe things will change. Things will not change unless you tackle the root causes. Unless you tackle the root causes. And if you want to talk about regime change, and if you want to talk about renewal, did you hear anybody from the international community talking about the Israeli government? Seriously? We have the most renowned members of our cabinet right now, respected and adhering to international law and resolutions, and in line with the international consensus. Can you apply that on Smotrich, or Ben-Gvir, Andrew, or Netanyahu? So stop this. Stop it. And there is another side to this. There's another major side to this, which is a very implicit line all through that for some reason we are the only exception on earth whereby our rights are conditioned upon some sort of behavior. Shall I say it again? Our rights are conditioned upon some sort of behavior, i.e., the Palestinians they have to behave in a certain manner, which is according to their occupiers' judgment, for them to be worthy the right of self-determination. for them to be worthy the right to return, for them to be worthy a state. This is utter nonsense. Nonsense. We have been behaving, however, but even if we misbehave, our right to self-determination is a birthright. Has nothing to do with how tall are we, how wide are we, how good are we, how bad are we, how good managed or mismanaged we. I haven't heard this in any other case. So it is very important to call out that logic. And in my opinion, that logic is very designed. It's orchestrated. It's meant. It's inbuilt in the whole process of Israeli-led, US-led so-called peace processes. And it is meant to block the final outcome. I said before, I say it again, Andrew, we are not perfect. Who is? And there is a lot that needs to be done. But I assure you, if you now have an initiative whereby the world is ready to implement its own resolutions, their own resolutions, of a two-state solution on the 1967 borders, you will find Palestine ready to implement that, and you will find the Israeli government completely and utterly unready to do so. Okay, I'm going to have to divert here, or my friend and my friend, Guardian. And
Harry Fawcett from Al Jazeera English. Can I just ask you to expand a bit on what you were saying about standing ready to run the entire Palestinian territory as a state, but not to be in any way sort of a halfway house after the war? What would you be prepared to do in Gaza once hostilities have ceased, before there were full statehood?
Well, it's clear. It's very clear. There were two agendas for the last 35 years. The first is the Palestinian, and with us the entire international community. That agenda was going towards backrolling Israeli occupation, colonization, and establishing a state of Palestine, and resolving all outstanding issues in accordance with international resolutions, legitimacy, consensus. That's the first agenda, and that's why we went to the Madrid Peace Conference under the US auspices and mediation at the time, if you remember, in other major countries, and then the Oslo agreements and the Oslo process. The second agenda, which started shortly after the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, shortly after, so the whole thing, this first agenda was lived for a year and a half, and then Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated, and who was elected? Benjamin Netanyahu, remember, 1996. There comes the second agenda. You're talking about a quarter of a century now, 25 years of Netanyahu's government. In and out, but he was the key sort of decider of the direction of travel Israel was taking. And that agenda is an agenda that is anti-two-state solution, that is based on bypassing the Palestinian issue. Remember all that he has done and the normalization and what have you. Bypassing the Palestinian issue, having us as the biggest elephant in the room, but don't talk about it. And slowly build what the Likud charter says, the Greater Israel Project, from the river to the sea. That's the second agenda. And why I'm explaining all that? Because within the second agenda, there comes Netanyahu's Israeli successive government's obsession with maintaining Palestinian geographic and political divisions. Do I need to give you details? Al Jazeera knows about this more than anyone else. Netanyahu was enabling cash to go into Gaza because he has said it publicly in the Knesset that he wants to see the Palestinians continue being divided, fragmented. That's why we need to empower the first agenda. And that's why the only legitimate entity that takes over is a state of Palestine that is there to protect and provide for its people in Gaza, in Jerusalem, in the West Bank, and in the diaspora and exile. A state of Palestine that is an agent and agency for their people. That is the source of legitimacy. Now about the practicality, all what it takes is a bit of political will. And I outlined the process of starting at a global decision that sends a clear message in the Security Council, and then we work the little details. But the time of trying to create several authorities, the time to play on the fragmentation is gone. It's gone. The entity, the agency that should take care of our people is the state of Palestine. The government of that state is the PLO in interim, because the PLO is the sole legitimate representation of every Palestinian, the 13+ million of us, inside and outside. And the PLO will be tasked to convene elections for the government of the state of Palestine once elections are possible. Okay, I'll come to Patrick and then I'll come to...
Hi, thank you very much. It's Patrick Richard from The Guardian, and thank you, Ambassador. You've been very critical of the UK government, and I wonder how disappointed you are with the Labour leadership, because they say that they support a sustainable ceasefire, which is only achievable after Hamas no longer poses a threat to Israel. They haven't, as far as I can see, supported the ICJ case, and they will not say if international humanitarian law is being breached by Israel. They just say that they should comply with it. So my questions are, what do you think motivates the Labour leadership? And do you think it's right there will be no negative electoral impact for Labour? And how much damage is being done to the UK generally, not just to the Labour Party, reputationally in the region, in the Middle East, by adopting the policies they have? Thank you.
Well, all what I can say about the UK Labour Party is that we expect the current leadership to be true to its own base. We know where the Labour base is. The Labour base is with an international or internationalist agenda. The Labour base is with a fair, just solution to the issue of Palestine. The Labour base is with the Labour Party committing to international law and committing to the provision of international law, such as the ICJ. The Labour base is also with sanctions being enforced on any illegal transactions, including the settlements and the settlers and what have you, the companies working in the settlements. There has been numerous conferences, congresses of the Labour Party, numerous resolutions throughout the last so many years. So we expect the Labour leadership to reflect the depth of feeling and the policies of its own base and its own values. That's what we truly expect. And of a leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, who is himself a lawyer specializing in international humanitarian law. So he knows best, and we hope that will be reflected more and more in his and their policies in the time to come. As for the issue of the damage, the reputational damage of the UK, I've said this to very senior UK ministers and officials that as far as the perception in the region, damage has been done. Damage has been done. And the perception is that the UK is always quick to shield Israel. The perception is that the UK is unable, unwilling to focus primarily on the root cause, and the UK has not helped in the call for a ceasefire. However, there is a long history here, a very long history, goes back many, many decades ago, and I hope that that perception is going to be fixed, attended to, altered, reversed very soon. We believe that the UK has a role to play. We believe the UK was the penholder of international diplomacy. You have one of the best diplomatic diplomatic capacity in the world. You are a founder of the international system, the post-World War II international system. I keep reminding myself and others that the first UN General Assembly did not take place in San Francisco or New York. It took place here in London, in the Methodist Church in Westminster Square. The first UN General Secretary was British, and therefore we are really hoping that the UK would, and by the way, the UK was the penholder up until recently. We are hoping that the UK will return to be that, to be a force of enforcing international legality and international rules, and that in itself will take care of the issue of reputational damage. Yes. And then after. Okay. We'll take the last three questions. Okay.
Press TV.
Mhm.
The escalation in the region,
Mhm.
do you feel that there's a danger of that distracting from what is happening in Palestine for the attention to go away from Palestine?
Well, from day one, we have been warning that the aggression on Gaza, if not stopped, will spread. The West Bank, including Jerusalem, is on a tipping point. Literally, Israel is invading towns, refugee camps all over the West Bank, and you are following, provoking, killing, maiming, arresting. You're talking about thousands. So it's a matter of time when pressure will. We have been warning from this becoming regional because we know Netanyahu would want to make it regional, and we know that his allies might have to actually be dragged into his wars and his calculations. So we warn that the spread of this is going to be damaging, and the only way to stop the spread is to stop the aggression on Gaza. A ceasefire immediate. And we need to stop as an international community to deal with the symptoms. Symptoms. We have got to go straight to the cause, not the symptoms. The immediate cause is the aggression on Gaza, this atrocious, murderous campaign. That's the immediate cause. As for the actual cause, it is, as I have described, the military occupation and the colonization. Okay, please, and then.
From Al Jazeera, thank you very much for having us here today. The International Center of Justice for Palestinians announced today they provided the Met Police with more evidence of war crimes committed by Israelis, and there was some evidence related to British politicians as well. What's your take on this kind of effort from campaign groups, and how can you explain to us the discrepancy between the British street? We see you every weekend leading hundreds of thousands of people protesting for a ceasefire in Gaza, but there's a failure in convincing one parliamentary party, English parliamentary party, to call for a ceasefire. How can you explain this to us?
What was the first question, sorry?
About the International Center of Justice for Palestinians. Announced today they provided the Met Police with evidence for war crimes committed by Israeli leaders, and also some British politicians, some remarks from them supporting this kind of war crime.
I don't have the details about the International Center for Justice for Palestinians. I'll leave it to them to comment on that, but I can assure you of our complete support for the legal track. We need to leverage, utilize, benefit from the legal track, from the court system, everywhere possible. So we hope that courts, judicial institutions will be a place where we stop the madness, the carnage, the atrocities. As for the public, the British public, I very much agree that this is the most empowering, inspiring, and strategic development that happened since 100 days. Seeing hundreds of thousands, millions, not only in London, but all over the UK and the world, is a scene that reminds us of the anti-apartheid movement. And like that of the South Africa anti-apartheid movement, some governments came very late in supporting the anti-apartheid movement. It is often the people who actually start a movement. It is often the people who side with justice. It is often the people, not politicians, who actually create dynamics, power, pressure to change the course of history and to free Nelson Mandela, remember? So I take what happens in the streets of London very strategically, very strategically. You know why? And I believe Britain is the most strategically relevant place for a movement for Palestine, because the anti-apartheid movement emanated from London. It was the British people who led the anti-apartheid movement. And I believe, given the history, given the Balfour Declaration, that colonial declaration, the arrogance of the British Empire, promising our land without consulting us and turning us, the natives who have lived there for millennia, the birthplace of Christianity and almost every other civilization, the crossroad of civilizations, turned us into non-Jewish minorities. Therefore, the historic, legal, political, moral relevance of Britain cannot be overstated, on the one hand. On the other hand, the British people are known for their quest for justice, fairness, exposed and very well read. London is known for its being the hub of international activism, the hub of international civil society. You have very, very complex set of institutions. The hub of international media, look at you here. And therefore, we are in the right place at the right time with the right people to be with this movement, be part of this change, and I, for one, believe that this is the best hope we have to change the positions of the government here and elsewhere. The lady behind, and then we will, okay, BBC wants to come back.
Thank you.
Paul.
Christina, TV News. There's been a lot of support from the public, especially here in London, with pro-Palestine protests. What do you make of these?
What do I make of what, sorry?
The protests in London in support of pro-Palestine. And also, what do you make of the fact that some of them have actually been using pro-Hamas language and sort of supporting those views? Thank you.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you for being here from GB. I have taken part in almost every demonstration, and I was a speaker in most of them, if not, I mean the central ones. I haven't seen, chantings that people are accusing these people. I have seen love. I have seen love. I have seen commitment to international legality. I have seen diversity. I have seen unity. I have seen all colors, all religions. I have seen many, many Jewish brothers and sisters in these demos, and not just for the last 100 days, but for the last 75 years with us. I have seen the best Britain offers. The way Britain did this to the South Africans is the way British people are doing it to Palestine. And attempts to conflate and to use one person here and two individuals there to conflate and to actually frame millions is a very bad exercise. We should focus on the millions, not the 2-3 individuals. The millions are calling out for an immediate ceasefire. That is something so humane, that is something so British, that is something that should be hailed and respected. The millions are demanding an end of Israel's occupation. That is the policy of the UK. That is the international consensus resolutions. And the millions are promising to create an agency to put pressure on all that to happen. So let's not defame and defile and desecrate the most beautiful thing that happened over the only beautiful thing that happened in the last 100 days, which is the outpouring raw emotions and principled solidarity of ordinary mother. You know, I was walking last Saturday. How many mothers with their babies, with their iPads playing around? It was Britain there. It was ordinary families. And the media here, I've seen all the headlines. The media would start 6 arrests at, you see, the framing, 6 arrests, okay, there were 500,000. There is always an attempt to focus on the fringe, not the bulk, not the heart. We need to stop that, Christina, and we need to really, really give these people what they are owed of respect, admiration, because so far they are the best hope we have. Okay, I will have to choose Paul and our friend from Memo, Nassim, and that's it.
Ambassador, before October the 7th, the case of Palestine had almost vanished from the international agenda. The White House thought the region was sustainable. There was no pressure on the government. Everyone was... The phrase "the two-state solution" had almost entirely disappeared. Now it's back every day, day in, day out. You have the Saudis saying that any attempt at a normalization with Israel will now be conditional in a more explicit way than perhaps was ever the case before. Do you feel that this is actually a moment of opportunity? Do you feel any optimism that out of the dreadful things that have happened in the last 3 or 4 months, something better will emerge?
Yes, with a capital letter. Yes, because anybody who thought that they could bypass the Palestinian issue has at least stopped thinking so. And anyone who thought that Israel's military might is the solution, and I mean anybody including in the Israeli ranks and files, have to think again. Anybody who thinks that the occupation could turn into a permanent reality has got to rethink. Anyone who thought that that biggest elephant in the room could be simply abracadabra disappearing has to think again. So yes, with that comes an opportunity for seriousness, for political will, for a momentum. It does. It does. And I believe that we could do it. But I have my fears. I have my reservations. And the main reservation I have, the main fear I have, this tragedy that happened since the 7th of October, most horrific tragedy in modern history, a scar in our humanity for generations to come, could be turned into a momentum, a positive momentum. But it requires one thing: international leadership. Now, Paul, you name me if we have international leadership now. You tell me. My fear is this moment will be wasted by the lack of a serious, powerful, determined, consistent, principled international leadership. My fear is we will go back to the last 30, 40 years of oops, there is elections in the US. Oops, there is election in the UK. Oh, let's wait for elections in Israel. Always deferring, always kicking the ball to the other side, always buying time. And I assure you one thing: if we buy time this time, time will be our enemy. Time will be our enemy, not our friend. So I hope my fears are not accurate, and I hope, because all the ducks are aligning now. And I'm saying international leadership because, forget it, to wait for an Israeli government that will be perfectly ready to bring the majority of their population towards and implement international consensus, I'm not so sure if this will happen in your and my lifetime. Palestinian institutions could be easily empowered, supported by an international system, international alliance, could bring it to the best level there is, and they do exist, and we have them. The missing point is the role of a third party. That's the missing role. And our issue was started by a third party, that's your country, Paul, that's the UK, was sustained by a third party since then, that's the US. Our issue is international. And name me one conflict that was resolved without a strong, sustained international intervention, a third party role. One conflict. South Africa, Ireland, the Balkans, well, East Timor, every and each one of those were resolved because of a sustained, credible, international, external mediation and credible and intervention. And therefore, I hope that part of the equation is not going to be missing in the coming weeks and months.
two questions, 2 points. First, President Joe Biden issued a statement yesterday marking 100 days since October 7th. It's shocking to many because not a single word about Palestinians, 24,000 killed, and he did not have the courage or the empathy to say anything about the Palestinians. So comment on that. And also, Labour yesterday did a U-turn, Starmer, saying that they will reverse their initial plan to recognise a Palestinian state. Why now? That seems another attempt to penalise the Palestinians. So what was committed to you, what was said to you? Can you share your thoughts on those two developments?
Okay, thank you, Nassim. Thank you very much. Biden and the 100 days statement, it's very regrettable. It's extremely, extremely painful and regrettable to see the President of the U.S. That has been wanting to be the sole mediator in the peacemaking, that poses itself as a guarantor of international legality, that hosts the UN, mentions 100 days with failing to mention the 10,000 children who have been slaughtered, the 85,000 who have been killed and injured, the lives taken without any consideration of any provision. It's very painful, and I believe this has more to do with the US than us, and it does speak volumes about the US policies and standings in the world, and lots needs to be done there. And I'm not going to comment further. As for Sir Keir Starmer and the reported news yesterday that he may reverse his policies, we have sent a letter to the Labour leadership requesting clarification about this. We are yet to receive it. It was late last night that that thing came out. Once we do, we will comment on it. For now, we expect, demand that the UK Labour continues to have its very clear policy of immediate recognition, of banning the illegal settlement products, of supporting international legality, ICC and ICJ, and of supporting a political resolution that includes the ending of the occupation, Israeli occupation. Any change of that policy would be seen as rewarding Netanyahu just when he had just committed the most horrific genocide in recent memory. So I thank you all for this. Thank you very much, and we'll see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You